What's up, amigos? Commander Jaime here today. We're going to do an updated Zorga deck profile. So set 2 just came out and I just wanted to show it off. So let's get right into it.
Hey there, amigos. Quick sponsorship shout outs. So Next Level Gaming has the playmats available. As you can see, I have the Zorga playmat. It's super nice, really good quality too. There's some for the other units and characters from Overdress too. So if you're a fan of those, definitely check out the website. You can click on the description below for the 10% discount to get a 10% discount on your next purchase.
So real quick, let's start with the winning image. And so set 1, Zorga hasn't changed much. Obviously, the main core of the deck is using Alchemagic. So that way you can use 2 orders at the same time and get that basically double the benefit in that case too. And one of the things that also Zorga has the ability to revive units with Zorga skill and other orders, for example, too. So that way you're able to conserve hand and also, use those order cards from hand too, so you're not losing too much advantage. And so the deck before also wanted to make really good numbers, anywhere from 33k and above if possible. We are restricted to being a 3 attack deck, so we had to be very selective on the power up and making sure those turns are key. The biggest thing that this deck actually got from this set, what I appreciated, is this card over here, Nectar of Sensationalism. Wow, they changed that name too. So what this card does is that choose one of your rearguards until the end of the turn. It gets plus 5k for every 5 cards in your drop zone, and then if your drop zone has 15 or more cards, it gets an additional crit. So this helps give Zorga more crit pressure on top of like the actual trigger lineup. So when you're a 3 attack deck, you can only do so much, and so having that extra crit pressure actually opens up the door for much more threatening turns. Yes, obviously a crit is more dangerous, but what I mean by that is that, when your opponent was 3 or 4 damage, it wasn't as threatening compared to there were already 5, because that meant they have to guard every attack at that point. Now with the additional crit, you can actually force the opponent to making sure they would perfect guard your Vanguard, because they don't want to get a chance of a trigger, like a critical trigger. But now then you have another column that's still crit too, so then that can attack and potentially put them from 4 to 6. So now they have to worry about that and use more resources to guard against that attack too as well. Not only that, if your opponent's at 3 and you hit them and you do drive track a crit trigger, you could put the crit on the other rearguard column. So that way they go to 4 and now they have to deal with 2 rearguard columns that have 2 crit. And so you could start seeing the lines of play actually becoming more threatening much in earlier of the less damage that they have already. The other aspect that Zorga has now, we actually have access to retire. And so this card over here, Regurgitation, Regurgitation from the Underworld. And so what this card does, it's Counterblast 1, Soul Blast 1. You can choose any player's rearguard and actually retire it, and then choose up to 1 card with the same grade as that card from your drop and call it to rearguard circle. And then if you did Alchemagic with this card, you can choose 2. So in a sense, you can choose one of your opponent's grade 2s, retire that, and then revive 2 grade 2s if you did Alchemagic with it. So that gives you removal and revival at the same time for a Counterblast Soul Blast. So you may start seeing like, okay, so we have Hendrina over here helping with the Soul Blast issue, but now we have a Counterblast issue too, because we have cards like Grief, Despair, and Rejection that we want to utilize too as well, potentially with the Alchemagic. That's a 2 Counterblast play if you think about it. But that's where a card here, Rogue Headhunter, actually helps with that. And so its main skill that we utilize is that when it's placed onto rearguard circle, then next time you would Alchemagic an order and play it this turn, you can reduce the cost by Counterblast 1. So you could essentially actually play 1 to make plays like that from 2 Counterblast to 1 Counterblast, or even make it Counterblast less at that point. You can even use multiple ones to start reducing the cost by Counterblast 1, 2, 3, and so on, depending on how many copies you had. And it's just nice because it also has a rearguard skill where, if you played an order, it'll get an additional 5k. So that becomes a 13k attacker or a booster in most cases. And that's where he can shine behind this card over here, this grade 2 Fleet Swallower. And sometimes we call him Shark Boy. But what he does is that when he attacks, and if you did Alchemagic, you can actually Soul Blast 1 when it attacks, and then until the end of the battle, this gets plus 5k, and your opponent would have to call cards from hand to Guardian Circle. They must call 2 or more at the same time. So that demands more guard. There's a lot of love-hate relationship with this card. Some people don't play it, some people play a couple copies, and the main thing is that it's actually really good, and I'll break it down in more of the actual card play ratios. So that's basically the winning image now that Zorga has more crit pressure, has some retire removal, has more of that Counterblast, Soul Blast management when it comes to Alchemagic, and then we have some not sentinel restriction, but more demanding of actually demanding more guard at that point. So let's dive into it. For the ride line, our ride line has not really changed at all. We have our starter, we have the grade 1 Rancor chain, and when he's placed, you can Soul Blast 1, draw 2, and then if you could discard an order, great. If you couldn't, you discard 2. So that just helps dig deeper into the deck. That's the way to get advantage, a +1. Same thing with Stoicheia. When he's placed on Vanguard, grab one of your normal orders and add it to your hand from drop. So that gives you another +1. And you could also Soul Blast these units to be able to reuse them as regards to where he can be a 10k booster. Hush Dragon can be a 15k attacker at that point too if you use an order. And then Zorga, obviously Alchemagic, where you can use 2 orders at once, 1 from hand, 1 from drop. The other skill is that you can counterblast 1, revive a unit from the drop zone, so that can help build up for those plays in your field formations and actually execute a really strong turn. Now into the remaining grade 3s in our main deck, we have 3 copies of the Zorga. We wanted to make sure we want a Persona ride. It's just very vital for Zorga to make numbers, and the easier it is, the better. With also using different Alchemagic options too, that plus 10k is much appreciated. So definitely play those 3 copies. Now with the order cards over here, we're still playing 3 of the Grief, Despair, and Rejection, or GDR. This card is, play this with Counterblast 1. If your Vanguard is Zorga, you can choose 3 of your units, give them plus 10k until the end of the turn. So typically I like to give the front row plus 10k, so that way you start pushing numbers, where Zorga can be 23k by himself, and then if you Persona ride, it could be 33k. Other units that are really bombing that or blowing up that threshold, where it's like maybe they're 23 or 28, and then the additional 10 makes them 33 and 38, and you can start demanding really those big shield values too at that point. So it's still a vital card, and so definitely play at least 3. For me, I played this 4 with the set 1, but now with trying to make room and stuff like that, I reduced it to 3. But you could always tweak it to 4 if you want to. This card is, I think it's one of the best cards what we have access to, just because the way that Zorga plays and it demands to have extra power to push. So with I'll start with the old card too, Cursed Souls. So this card, I've even said this before, and many others, they have a love-hate relationship too with it. And so what it does is that you can play this by Soul Blast 2, look at the top 4 cards of your deck, and then choose up to 1 unit, and then call it to regard, and then discard the rest. And then if you Alchemagic with this card, you can call 2 cards instead of the 1. And then those units will also get plus 5k until the end of the turn. Now, the hate part is that, 1, it mills cards. So if your deck's starting to get low, you lose 4 cards out of your deck at that point. You're not reviving necessarily straight from the drop zone. You're basically go Paladin style. You're superior calling from the deck. However, when this card is in the drop zone and you Alchemagic with another order, if you use a card like Regurgitation from the Underworld or Spiritual Body Condensation, those revive units will also get the plus 5k just by the wording of that play too. And so I actually have an article with the Zorga deck study, and then I actually edited to include that snippet too. I actually had a good amigo that pointed out in the comment section that you can do that, so it helps give additional power with also superior calling. And so that is a good segue. So 3, Regurgitation from the Underworld. And so when you play this card, Counterblast 1, Soul Blast 1, you can choose any rear guard from your side or your opponent's retired, call 1, but if it's Alchemagic, call 2 instead. And so this card, you can pair it up with Cursed Souls and Alchemagic and revive 4 cards in a sense, and those units would also get the plus 5k, so you essentially just can form 2 rear guard columns that are also plus 10k as well. So you can start seeing, wow, I can revive a field and still have that pseudo feeling of Grief, Despair, and Rejection too. So depending on how you play those cards, just be mindful of that. But it's just nice having to also be able to retire your opponent's regards too. And so the key grades that you want to retire are the grade 2s and the grade 1s. When it comes to like Bastion and they have a lot of grade 3s, it can be a little bit challenging. With this card, I'm testing at 3. And I feel like it might be able to go down to 2, but I don't know. And I can make more room for different cards too. I thought of using maybe Ghost Chase. I'm actually not playing Ghost Chase, for example. But this is something that you could start tweaking and playing with. And honestly, the card's really good. But how good it is, if it should be kept at 3, totally not sure yet. Onto the remaining grade 2s from the main deck. So we're playing 4 Hendrinus though, so when it's placed onto Regard Circle, you can discard 3 cards from the top of your deck. That's really good for building up your drop zone with order cards. Yes, it's random too, so you may not get the cards that you want to, but having her to be able to mill cards and start building up the drop zone. It helps with that Zorga game style that you're looking for. The second skill is an act. Retire this unit until the end of the turn. The next time you would Alchemagic an order in play, you may actually negate the Soul Blast clause. So that way, cards like her Soul, Spiritual Body Condensation, Regurgitation, those Soul Blasts are negated. And so that helps a ton because Zorga can't really build enough Soul as easily as compared to other decks, such as like Dark States. But, you know, with Zorga, you have to like Persona Ride to start building up Soul, really. And not to mention that you may Soul Blast 1 or 2 cards for different things, such as like unlocking units from the prison against the Seraph Snow matchup. So just be mindful of that, and that's why I still play 4. And then, of course, with the new grade 2 over here, Fleet Swallower, this is the one when it's an attack, plus 5k, and your opponent has to call 2 cards in order to guard from hand. And so when you start having a column that starts reaching to 28k, and then especially if you start powering it up to with Persona Writing, with GDR or other skills, you start hitting like 38k, 43k, and so on. And it can go even higher. And what happens is that at that point, your opponent wants to PG. Now, this forces a second card, and so not only they're using a PG and then discarding for the cost of that, now they're gonna have to call a dummy card to also be able to do that in the first place. So you're guaranteed to rip 3 cards from their hand at that point. They can also as easily put, you know, 15k triggers. That is true too as well, but in this case you know what to expect. And so that's one of the things that I see with this card. He's not necessarily the nail on the coffin, but he's definitely going to get you there, and there's going to be at those moments where he is at that point. So that's the way I look at him too. And so to help with that, we have the grade 2 Nectar order card over here. And again, by every 5 cards in your drop zone, this unit that you choose will get 5k, or should say regard. So that's why even Hendrina is more important. And so early on, if you can use Cursed Souls, if you can use Hendrina, cards that help you mill, you can start getting closer to the 15 number really easily. And even if you don't get to the 15, you can still use this card for Alchemagic and actually get plus 10k to a unit. It's almost like a Grief, Despair, and Rejection, but just with 1 unit at that point. So just be mindful of that too. You don't have to wait to the 15 as well. And then as the late game goes, you start hitting 20 cards in the drop zone, your unit will be plus 20k with an additional crit. So you can start seeing cards like Fleet Swallower over here and other cards become more of a threat at that point. Now, I wish we can use 2 at the same time, but Zorga requires them to be different. Now, there's the other one, I think it's Anchor, the grade 3, that requires the same card, so you can do plays with that if you use that different right line. But I really like Nectar because it adds that crit pressure that Zorga needs, and it can be used pretty much the mid to late game, which is where you want your opponent to be 3 to 4 or 5 damage at that point too, and having that crit pressure seal the deal for you. For the remaining grade 1s in the main deck, we are playing the 4 PG. This is the one that, you know, if you have 1 or less, you don't have to discard. Definitely play that one still. We have Spiritual Body Condensation, you know, Soul Blast 1. Choose a grade equal to or less than your Vanguard from your drop zone, and superior call it to regard, and it gets plus 5k until the end of the turn. So this is good for reviving single beaters such as Hoss Dragon, such as that Fleet Swallower card, and other units that you can start building that field formation. Plus with Alchemagic, it just makes those numbers better, so it's still a good card. I was playing 4 in the prior build, but you know, room had to be made, and that's why I was suggesting that you can tweak the ratios, but definitely play 3 at least. Even Magnolia plays at least 3 as well in that build too as well. And so down here is the new card, Rogue Headhunter. Like I said, reduces by Counterblast 1 for the Alchemagic that you're going to do. You can do multiple, like call them to regard, so you can Counterblast 1, 2, 3 less, or 4. You don't need that many at that point, but you get my drift. And then it gets 5k if you played an order this turn. So it's a 13k booster that's just very helpful. I know we had Adamantus back in set 1 that helped with those numbers too, especially if you needed to make a dummy easy 23k column. And this card is really easy because he's already 13k, so just slap a 10k grade 2 and you're already there. But yeah, if you didn't even use the Soul Blast 1 skill from Fleet Swallower, you still hit like 23k number, for example. So it's just an overall good card. And one of the tricks you can do too is that Zorga can revive it with his Counterblast skill. and then his skill will proc off where you don't have to spend a counterblast. So that gives your resources to easily do Alchemagic more easier. I definitely recommend 3 or 4 cards. Right now I'm messing with 4, I'm liking it so far. But if I wanted to make room for like cards like Ghost Shades or different beaters and change it up, I might consider reducing it to 3. But playtesting will show with that. For the triggers, we're still playing the 8 crit on top here. You want to have crit pressure, you want 4 heals because you want to heal. Now we got the new front triggers from the new set. This is Frenzied Harris. It's a really good art. I like it better than the other front trigger that we got in set 1. And it actually has a skill. So Guardian Circle, when your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, this unit gets plus 5k. So it becomes a 20k shield to use. And in Zorga, you appreciate cards with shield value, because when you start having 2+ more cards that are orders in your hand, those cards are useless to guard with. So, you know, they're only useful for maybe like cost for PGs, or then saving 1 for the next turn to be able to Alchemagic, but it's just like, this helps with the shield quality for Zorga. So I definitely appreciate this, and so I play 4. I've seen people play, I play 3 I should say, and I've seen people play 4 where they reduce the crit, and there's a good point to that. If you want the additional shield and you want the additional chances of buffing your front row with a 10k, that's perfectly valid at that point. So either way is fine. And so the over trigger, I am using the Blessed Favor. Again, that's the extra critical pressure. That also is a draw trigger in a sense, and it also is a front trigger. So it helps with Zorga's playstyle at that point too. You can try, you know, using the Cray Elemental to give the other column additional 1,000,000, but just having an additional crit, having the additional draw, and the potential of healing too is another way of countercharging in a way. So it just helps with the overall synergy of the Zorga deck profile. So now onto the combo part of the video. I just want to show one example gameplay with the new cards too. So as you can see, you can have a feel where your 2 beaters are Fleet Swallower, Husk Dragon, and then the boosters are Headhunters and Rancor Chain. And if you use cards like Hendrina, or if you use like Rogue Headhunters, then you don't have to pay counterblast, you don't have to worry about Soul. In this turn, I'm assuming I Persona Road, for example, so it's plus 10k flat out. You have these cards either from hand, or you call them from the prior turn, for example. So then I'm going to use like Alchemagic with these 2 cards. It doesn't matter which one is in the drop or in the hand, so I'm using this as an example. And what I typically do is just to have the pressure, I want to have like the power up and the crit here on the Fleet Swallower. So that way they see that as a threat at potentially making sure they either have the PG and then lose 3 cards. That's one way to look at it. Or you could split it into Hush Dragon, but I'm going to do it on this example too. And so if we start seeing the numbers, you Persona Road, you did GDR as well over here. I'll put this in the camera so you guys can see that too, for the whole front row. So here on your left column, Hush Dragon is 15k because you use an order, so it got plus 20k, so that's a 35 plus 13, that's 48. So this is a 48k column if you Persona Road, if you did the GDR play, and then of course their power-ups, it's another 10k that they get. It's really powerful at that point too. Furthermore, on the right, Fleet will basically be the same number, but the additional 15k, or if you have like 20 cards in the drop zone, even more. So that would make it like 63k, for example. And then Zorga by himself, with the boost, he'll be 23, 33, and then boosted by a 10 will be 43. So this is a strong 3-column attack turn with crit pressure. And then of course, if you have, you know, your drive checks, which I'm not going to show here, but essentially, you know, you attack with your Vanguard to have that crit pressure, especially if they're at 4. And then if you do get a crit, you put it on the Hush Dragon, so that way then you can attack with it. Becomes maybe 58k with the crit, and then they're like, oh crap, I have to guard with that. And then Fleet Swallower, where you Soul Blast 1 to use the skill, and then force at least 3 cards to guard with if they use a perfect guard, for example. So this is actually pretty strong still, so I just wanted to show that off. And the last thing I'll show off is really the Alchemagic ruling. So with Cursed Souls, this is, some players don't necessarily know this ruling. So like I was kind of briefly mentioning in the deck profile part. So if you have Cursed Souls in the drop, when you do Alchemagic, the card that you play from hand gets the word text from this card. So if you were to read it this way, where is, you know, you retire, you call up to 2, and then also you can look at the top 4 of your cards, blah blah blah. And if they're in this Alchemagic, if you call up to card, if you Alchemagic, you can call up to 2 instead of 1, and then all of your orders, all of this orders called units gets 5k. That wording makes it that this is a new order with the additional text that includes the superior call from this card. And so when you retire, for example, a grade 2, you'll revive these 2, and then from the random top 4, let's say you got lucky and you got through grade 1s, all 4 units, oh, the camera, there we go, all 4 units will get plus 5k. That is important and actually can make a difference, because now you're calling to plus 10k, and that's from you building your field, removing one of their cards, and giving power to some units. So it's a jack of all trades in a sense, but it's actually very important to know that play. And then you can pair this up with another card like Spiritual Body Condensation and any future Alchemagic revival orders that are going to come soon eventually. So yeah. And that's my updated deck profile for Zorga from set 2. I am still playtesting around, so I like to make some tweaks. There might be different avenues that I like to explore, for example, a more heavier mill type of build, but playing with testing this already, you can tell that even cards like with Hedrina and Cursal is maybe enough at that point. But and then certain ratios, because there's fantastic cards from set 1 such as Ghost Chase that I do miss from this build. So if there's a way I can squeeze maybe at least 2 copies, I'll try that out too as well. And so I just wanted to get this out there so people can have an idea of how to play this. There are different deck profiles that I've seen online too. I'll actually put a good friend of mine, I guess MK2, his build actually gave me a lot of insight too, especially when it came to the Shark Boy over here, and then some of the other cards that came out from the new set too. So I hope this was something that you guys enjoyed. If you liked the video, give it a like down. Comment down below, what are some thoughts maybe like after playtesting, or things that you want to try out, or what's your build? I'd love to hear that feedback too as well. And then of course share it with some amigos that like Stoicheia or Zorga, or just even come from clans such as Grand Blue too. They may like this as well, of course. And then of course subscribe. So see you amigos, bye, until we're here with Regurgitation. Regurgitation, wow, regurgitation from the so 3 regurgitate, yeah.